In August of 2016, Jonathan and I found out that we were going to be parents. Little did we know, on March 24th, when we went into labor, we would be in labor for 22 hours. We were surprised by little Mason. He was a little boy. We had no idea. And we also had no idea of the condition that he was in. At 8:26 on March 25th, Mason finally made his debut. He had lost a lot of blood, so they decided to take him back to start an IV. About 2 hours later, Dr. Sherry Barclay and Jonathan walked into the room, and I knew something was wrong. Dr. Sherry knew that he had had a heart murmur and told us that it was a fairly large heart murmur and that he needed to be transported, and she had a helicopter on the way from Medical City. This was not my perfect pregnancy plan. It wasn't a part of my plan at all, or my story. But I remember the Lord telling me, Cami, put your pen down and stop writing your story. This is my story, and everything is perfect, and it's exactly how I planned it out to be.
Actually, I don't know how fast my dad may have been going down the highway, but we actually got to the hospital about the same time as Mason in the helicopter. Within about 15 minutes, Dr. Laird came and asked if I was Jonathan and if Mason was my son, and I proudly said yes. So he said we needed to talk. He sits us down and says, Jonathan, I just want to tell you that your son's going to be okay, that he's going to be just fine. And he has a condition called tetralogy of Fallot with severe pulmonary stenosis. And I said, cool, doc, what's that? So basically what that means is he has a hole in the, there's 4 chambers of your heart, the bottom 2 chambers, there's a hole in the wall that separates those 2 chambers. And he also, that tissue that should have formed in the middle chamber of his heart actually fell over and flapped over and pretty well closed off his pulmonary artery that goes from his heart to his lungs. Not only was his heart not pumping as hard as it should because of this hole, it was mixing blue and red blood in his heart, so then it was sending purple blood to the body, which is somewhat unoxygenated. It also wasn't sending enough blood to the lungs to become oxygenated. Upon hearing that, mixed with emotion and Cami on the phone, we didn't know what the next step would be. And that's when he said that this was something that could be fixed through surgery. He would be able to live a full life and a happy life and a life with activities.
At 6 o'clock that night, I finally got dismissed out of Hopkins County, and I headed to Dallas, where I finally got to see my son for the first time. Little did I know that I could not hold him. That was probably one of the hardest things. Just reality of not being able to hold your baby, not knowing what's going on, not having any control at all. On March 27th, which was 2 days after he was born, the doctors finally told me that I could hold my baby boy for the first time. Dad got to hold the next day, and I could only hold for 3 hours, and that 3 hours was the shortest 3 hours of my life. On March 28th, as we first walked into the room to check on Mason, we were sent on a roller coaster ride. The first news we were told of his scans is that our baby boy had a hemorrhage, which is a brain bleed. As we're Googling what this means, because we have no idea and we're not doctors, it says that it is treatable, but we're not able to cure it.
We were in a low spot at that point. We just felt like there was thing after thing attacking our faith, and it was beginning to wear on us. Of course, it was a weary first 3 and 4 days. So they did a repeat MRI just to double check and make sure that it was exactly what they saw. And at 4 o'clock, the doctor walked back into our room, and as she began to talk, she started stumbling on her words because she said that we could not find the hemorrhage again. That in the first picture it was clear that there was a hemorrhage, and 4 hours later it was not clear at all, and they couldn't find any sign of a hemorrhage. That was kind of the first time that we had said, okay, God is going to do something crazy. By April 1st, so he would have been 6 days old or so, Mason was completely off of oxygen. We were beginning to see some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Little did we know that, surgery day was coming, and it wasn't going to be the easiest day for us. It was the first time in my life that I just felt completely out of control.
So surgery day came on April 12th. I remember just walking back, and it was just me and Jonathan. And we had Mason, and we could see him, and we could physically hold his hand. But that moment that we had to let him go and just completely sacrifice him up to the Lord, we just had to trust that this surgery is exactly what the Lord needed him to go through and for us to go through. And so we let him go, and Mama lost it in Daddy's arms. We got updates throughout the surgery. It took about 4 hours. We finally got the news that he was out of surgery. And so they start wheeling him out in the hallway, and we're all lined up like it's a parade. All the blue Mason shirts, and just family and friends and people who love us and love Mason. We're all lined up, and here he comes, and there's machines beeping, and he looks like a robot. I mean, there's just stuff everywhere. Once they finally got Mason settled into his room, Mom and Dad finally went back to see him. It was a little overwhelming once again with all the 20 machines that had all different medicine. And once again, those doctors told Mama that we could not hold baby Mason for a couple of days. And that's the hardest thing to do, is to watch your baby be hooked up to things and just not being able to hold him or cuddle him.
Mason again was on the vent for 2 days, and then he came off the vent. He just had a CPAP machine assisting with some oxygen. And just a few days later, he was completely free of that. The progress that they saw in Mason was, in their words, incredible. Typically what would take this kid 5 to 8 days took Mason 3 days. Mason was doing awesome in everything except for one area, and that was swallowing. He knew how to swallow, but his body didn't know exactly where to send his milk, so he was aspirating. They limited his PO, food supply, by mouth, and we placed a feeding tube. It was either sit at the hospital for another 2 weeks and see if this would clear itself out, or go home with a feeding tube in his nose down to his stomach. Dad made the executive decision to let's go home with the feeding tube. Sure enough, April 26th came, and it was a Wednesday morning, and me and Cammie were exceptionally chipper that day. We had packed up our hotel room that we had called home for 28 days and made our way to the hospital for one last hoorah, and we finally discharged at about 12:20 that afternoon. And so for about 2.5 months, Mason kept the feeding tube in. Me and Cammie just kind of decided that we were going to take the feeding tube out, and we were just going to do what it took as parents to make sure that he was able to drink everything that he could by mouth. As you can tell, he doesn't miss a meal.
In August, we go back to the cardiologist to check on Mason's heart to see when his second surgery will be.
At that point, his heart will be functioning as all of our hearts do. We were pretty shaken, and we were surrounded with love and encouragement. Man, the devil is real, all right? And he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Through all of the hurdles and the bricks and the stones that were thrown at us, we had God show up in many, many ways. When you have a church family come alongside and say, if there's a need, we want to find it. If there's a need, we want to fill it.
We knew that we were there for Mason, but we knew, looking around in other rooms, that parents with no faith, parents who couldn't speak English that needed to know the Lord or needed hope, we knew that we were there to minister to them. We knew that we were there to minister to our nurses, to our doctors. And we always go through battles, not just for ourselves, but for others, and to help others, and that to tell other people that just because we're Christian doesn't mean we don't have trials or tribulations. But it's how you deal with it, and if you're going to be an overcomer, if you're going to truly depend on the Lord or try to do it yourself. There's no doubt, there's no fear, there's no worry that this is the child of the Lord, and we are children of the Lord, and we are taken care of. This is our stone, but it's more than a stone.
It's a reminder that the Lord's hand is mighty and the Lord is worthy of our trust and our praise.